Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming out nice and early in the morning, although I appreciated that the leadership track didn't actually start until 10:15. So for those of you who slept in and skipped the morning keynote, you're good. I didn't notice. So first thing, there's a QR code up here that goes to a website for this talk. So if you'd like a slide, there's a good chance it's there because all my key slides are up there. There's a recorded version of the talk there. I will again put this QR code up at the end in case you don't get around to getting it, but I'll give a few moments while I start my intro for you to take a look at it. So as leaders, one of the biggest challenges we have is creating value. So some people like to think about, like, what do? You create value through your organization. But the reality is most of what we actually end up doing as leaders is the opposite. We destroy value, right? The people who create value are not us. It's everybody around us. They're the ones who create value. Our job is to help them do that a little bit better. So that's what I want to talk about today, is how to help them do that. That said, you will not learn everything you need to learn in this talk. There's a lot more content out there, so the website is that upper QR code. I have a weekly newsletter. You can get to it from that original website. I send out 1-minute tips every Monday morning when I get around to it. There's a book. Many of you have it in front of you. I will be signing that later today. Excuse me. So after this talk, I'll go sit at that table for a while if anybody wants it signed immediately. During lunch, I believe I'll be in the next ballroom. Look for me, I'm big, I'm tall, or find a staffer who's going to be like, hey, I know where Andy is, because he tried to hide, but I won't let him get away. You can find me on pretty much any social platform, mostly Twitter and LinkedIn these days. But let's get talking. So first I want to wake everybody up. So I'm going to ask you to use your voices. I'm going to ask you questions, and I want you to answer as quickly as you can. Okay? What color is snow? Okay, it's always important. I'm in North Carolina. You might not actually know what color snow is. You don't usually see it. So now that you all have heard somebody else answer the question, what color is snow? What color is snow? What do cows drink? Water. There we go. Okay. If you have been to a leadership training seminar, you have probably had somebody do a trick like this to you, or they'll do the one that's like, you know, Johnny went and he bought a baseball and a bat for $105. The bat cost $100 more than the baseball. What did the baseball cost? And like half the room is like $5. And after a while, the math brain's like, no, it's $2.50. What's really going on here is your brain is optimized for one thing: not thinking. That sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Right? To not think is what your brain is for. Right? Most of the systems in the human brain are organized to allow us to make decisions without spending cognition. Right? To not think about them. And that sounds kind of weird. How many of you have shoes with laces on them? Right? What I want you to do, you don't have to do it right now, but do this later, untie your shoes, and then, consciously thinking about every step, talk yourself through tying your shoes. If you don't have small children that you've recently taught to tie shoelaces, you will discover that it is way harder to tie your shoes if you think about it than if you just let your body do it and your brain do it without conscious cognition. Right? And this is what the human brain does. Those of you who drive have probably had experiences where you drive home and you get home and you're like, what did I see on the route home? What was going on? Right? Because you're not thinking about what's happening. If you want to change, you have to start consciously thinking about what you do to cause yourself to change, or you're going to just keep reacting. Most of what humans do is react, and we're really good at it. 99% of the time, your default reaction to make a decision is the right one. That is an advantage that we have, is that we are really good at making very cheap, mostly good decisions. But sometimes, those very cheap, mostly good decisions aggregate to being very cheap, bad choices. And so that's what today is about looking at some of the ways we can make those slightly better choices to get better and then make those habits so we can do it at scale. So the first question is, what is leadership? The biggest challenge is most people, when they hear leader, they think authority. They think this is a person who's a boss. They're in charge. And that's not a really good description of leadership. So I like to think about leadership in context, because first let's talk about what is work, right? And work is not just employment. Work is any activity where a human takes energy and converts that energy into value. So for some of you, that is, I go to work and I get paid my value to use my energy to hopefully create value for my employer, and hopefully they get more value out of what I did than out of what they pay me. Because otherwise they'll be like, why am I paying you to do this? Because it's not very valuable. Those of you who are in a organization like Triangle InfoSeCon are converting your energy into the value of a conference. I think many of you are not getting paid to do this, if not all of you are not getting paid to do this, but it is still work, production of value. If you're in a community organization, church, synagogue, social work, you name it, even just a friends group that gets together once a week to hang out, that is work. That is the taking of your energy to produce value. The value might just be fun. Now let's think about within that context, what is leadership? Well, that's a lot easier. Leadership is just making that transaction more efficient. If you go out and hang out, these four people are like, every Thursday night we go party, and if you spend half of your energy debating where you're going to go eat every week, it's not a lot of value you're getting out of that energy. If somebody's like, oh, this week we're going to go eat here, great, everybody's on board with that. Now all your energy is, hey, we're going to hang out. In the workplaces where we might think a little bit more about what we're going to do. So let's look at where we're bad at this. Right? What are the things that we do to the people in our organizations and in our teams to waste their energy? The first thing that we do is we exhaust them. Right? They waste energy before they even get to work. Commutes are a form of exhaustion. Right now, big debate everybody's having is we need to have people return to the office, which is mostly driven by CFOs putting pressure on the rest of the business, like we spent a lot of money on this office space and ain't nobody in it, so we need to get them back into the office space. Or by managers who don't know how to keep track of what their teams are producing and think that if I can just see you working, then I know that you're working. Rather than if I can see the value you produce, which does not require me to stand over your shoulder. When we make people come to work when they're sick, I mean, first of all, by the way, we're exhausting everybody else around them because they get sick as well. But if you're spending like 80% of your energy blowing your nose and suppressing your cough and staring bleary-eyed at that email you still have not written, you're spending energy, no value's coming out of it. That's exhaustion that we are putting onto our people. That's the first thing that we do, is we do not put them in a position to maximize the energy we get to extract for them. Now you'll notice that I pivot a little bit in here. Sometimes I'm using language that might sound a little, I don't know, unsympathetic to our employees. Because in a sense, you should think of yourself as a leader of having an angel and a devil on your shoulder. And the angel is the one that says, take care of your people, be really nice to them, do it for their own good. And the devil is the one that says, exploit your people and get the most out of them. Good leadership is when they agree, right? You exploit your people's wellness by not asking them to give anything when they are exhausted, sick, tired, and you take care of your people by not asking them to give anything when they are sick, exhausted, tired. They both agree that this is the right thing to do. Now, what else do? We exclude people. Anybody ever walk into a room and look around and you are the only person like you in that room? A lot of people, women all nod their heads first, that's very common. But pretty much happens to almost anybody. And the energy that people spend just looking around, like if you've never had this feeling, folks, like if you've never felt excluded, think about what it would be to walk into a room and be like, am I in the right room? Because that happens, right? Or there's a cost to being in that room. You show up in that room and you're like, you scheduled this meeting for 8 a.m. and I have kids that I have to get to school, right? They spent energy stressing about whether they would risk their career by asking to have the meeting moved rather than being able to say something. Or to say, hey, I used to get this, I had a CEO whose admin would be like, oh, the CEO demanded a meeting this week, I don't want to move anything, and how about 5:30 on Friday is when that meeting's going to be, right? For those of you who have not noticed the kippah on my head, 5:30 on Friday is the start of Shabbat, I don't work. Like, and I'm certainly not working to make it easier for you. But at that moment, I got to spend energy debating if I'm going to send email to the CEO telling him to correct his admin. Kind of painful. So we don't want to make people feel excluded because that is energy that they are wasting, right? Evil devil on the shoulder just says, don't make them waste energy worrying about this. Nice angel, don't make them waste energy, period. Like, this is just not nice to do. Next thing we do is we demotivate people. How many people have ever shown up, been working on a project, and you're like, I do not want to work on this, for whatever reason. Like, it could just be you did not like the way you were asked to do it. Like, I've had that. You did not think it was useful, right? Or you know that you're working on it, but tomorrow you're going to be asked to work on something different, and you're going to have to throw this away. For whatever reason, if you are not aligned with the work you're doing, you're wasting your energy. So bad things we do to people. And of course, there is inability, right? How many people in here have ever managed a Cisco firewall? Yeah, God, look at that. The leadership track, and you all have abilities on firewalls. How many of you who put up your hand before think that you're still qualified to manage a Cisco firewall? Good. Lot smaller crowd. If I ask anybody else to go do something on that firewall, they're going to spend a lot of energy, and they're not the right people to do it. Or maybe I take somebody else and I ask them to do something that they don't know what it is. Now, we should develop people, we should give them these opportunities, but we should recognize that having somebody who is not skilled at a task spend all of their energy on that task without supports is wasting their energy. Not always a good thing to do. Then, of course, there's always the big challenge, which is we find that we're ineffective. And by ineffective, I merely mean that the work that happened did not result in change in the organization. This could be the fault of the person who was doing it. This could be they got 95% of the way done, and we said, oh, we have new priorities. That work was entirely ineffective. We wasted everything that they put in because we did not make change in the organization. We produced no value. That, however, is still a better state than when we are misaligned in our organization. When we finish something and the change that we create stands in direct opposition to the rest of the organization. And now we're producing negative value out of the energy. Like, that's even worse than producing no value. Now you have negative value. So these are the 6 areas that we waste energy and just kill value, and that's the end of the negativity that I'm going to give y'all. But I want to give you some negativity, so I can now give you some positivity to help you be a little bit motivated. So I like to think of these as being problems in the area of personal stress, in skills, and in organizational alignment. So you might think of these as like personal issues, team issues, and organizational issues, although in reality, like some of the things that you think of as personal issues are an organizational issue. Some of the things you would think of as an organizational issue might be a personal issue. So let's flip this and say, what are the disciplines that we need to have to solve these problems? Right, first of all, we should develop alignment really easy. It's sort of the opposite of misalignment. We need to make sure that when we are a part of a larger organization, that we are working in alignment with the rest of the organization. As security professionals, especially, that is key, because often we are vastly misaligned with an organization. How many security organizations here have been told, either explicitly or implicitly, by yourself or by someone else, that your job is to stop unsafe things from happening? Nobody? Nobody wants to admit it? Their job, like, stop dangerous products from rolling out. Good, a couple of people, right? Stop unsafe things from happening. I can simplify that to stop things from happening. Right there, you are now misaligned with your organization because everybody else has make things happen as their implicit requirement. Now, it might be that your organization would say, roll out safe products profitably, and we separate that to the product team who gets roll out profitable products, and the security team gets stop unsafe products from rolling out. We have created a misalignment in the organization right there. Both teams should have the same goal, but we've explicitly told them to be at odds with one another. So we need to create alignment and make sure we're working on the same page. How do we deal with ineffectiveness? We need better planning. We need to make sure that the things that our people are doing will be things that we can make effective. We deal with inability by development. Right? You cannot expect that the people that you have today will be working for you tomorrow. So if you have only one person who can do something, you need to develop a lot of other people. You do not need to retain that one person. Most organizations have the exact opposite philosophy. It's like, well, I'll just keep paying this person a little bit more to keep them around so they don't leave. At some point, they're going to leave, hopefully to find a better job. They might die. They might just be frustrated and go away. But whatever reason, they're going to leave you. And that's a good thing because it gives an opportunity to develop other people, hopefully before that happens. We need to inspire people. We need to make sure that the energy that they show up with, they want to spend on us. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands here, but I'm sure you all know people or have been the person who is not at all aligned with the organization. You are showing up to get a paycheck, and then you walk away at the end of the day. Right? Which means you're actually giving time and probably not a lot of energy. Inspiration is what causes people to give more energy because they're excited by what they're doing and by the mission of the organization. Right? How do we solve exclusion? Through inclusion. Sometimes it's nice when these line up very simply that way. How do we make people feel welcome, feel seen when they show up so they want to show up? And for exhaustion is wellness. How do we focus on making people feel well so that we get more energy out of them? Because they only have so much energy to give a day. So on days that they don't have a lot of energy, maybe we don't take any in exchange for getting more days with more energy. So if you think about these in the high level, these become skills around authority, what most people think of as leadership, management, how you directly manage staff, and support, how you take care of individuals. So a team, a personal, and an organizational lens to look at these in. But as I said, those don't strictly necessarily follow this model of personal versus team versus organization. It's probably a little bit more like a matrix. There are personal things that span all 6 of these, team things, and org things. So I'm going to look at each one sort of in its own spectrum. So let's talk about wellness first. Wellness, in my little management devil voice, is just how do we maximize how much energy you bring to our organization? It has nothing to do with taking care of people. Taking care of people is the tool of wellness. The goal of wellness from a leadership perspective is making sure that you're getting the most energy, not the most time. Right? And that's a hard thing because most people are used to thinking in time. That's what we buy from people. So there's 2 ways we can do this. We can increase their total energy, have a wellness program, think about how you're taking care of people, make sure they go to the doctor. Anybody ever had like an executive concierge health program where you send your executives off to a physician on the premise that they'll take care of themselves? Not always sure it works out, but that's the idea there. Or how do we minimize how much energy they spend just to show up? Like if they're sick or they have sick kids in the house, probably 90% of their energy they're spending that day is on that issue, which means we only get 10%. So 90% of their energy is already gone. So think about that. That's 90% of the possible value they could give you already burned up, and we haven't even gotten to any other areas. So what are 3 lessons? And every lesson that I'm going to give you is a chapter in that book. So just to be clear, that I pop one up, these are each going to be chapters. So first chapter, and this is the one I like for individuals thinking about their leadership. Your wellness is your greatest asset. I do not care how good you are at doing your job. Your wellness is a more important asset. Because if you show up and you cannot actually put your skills to work, it doesn't matter. So if you are not taking care of yourself as a leader, you are not able to do your job of taking care of the people around you. And if you're not taking care of yourself as an individual, you're not able to deal with your job at all. At the team level, important thing, very, very rarely is the great work that somebody could do right now more important than the work they could do down the road. How many of you have teams that work on incidents in any fashion? I love this, almost everybody here. How many of you have, as part of your incident management program, within the first hour, determining if the incident is going to last more than 8 hours so that you can send home the people who will need to take over in 8 hours? I see a couple hands. That's awesome. I'm hoping everybody who didn't raise their hands is like, we don't have to do that because our incident teams are entirely operational and they already work on shifts anyway. Most organizations do something like this. Oh, we have an incident. Jane's the only one who knows how to solve this problem, and Jane will work on this incident until she passes out. Right? And then tomorrow we expect Jane back in the office, bright and early. Jane is not going to be working very well for a very long time. Right? And we see this not just at incident tempo. Oh, we have a deadline coming out this Friday, and I know we're behind, but everybody needs to work overtime this week to hit that product deadline, to hit that audit deadline, to hit whatever it is. And so we extract more work out of people. That work comes out of their own personal energy. They are now exhausted, and we're going to get less good work out of them down the road. Sometimes we might get zero good work out of them down the road because they decide to go find somebody else to work for. Right? So very rarely is the great work you can get right now more important than the merely good work you will get over a long period of time. The organizational level, how many organizations have a CEO who talks a great game about wellness? Come on, everybody should raise their hand. Like every CEO, it's like, oh, we care about you, we love you. You know, wellness, take care of yourself, take the time off you need. How many of you then see at the management level that does not translate through? Sure, the CEO said you could take time off, but we got a deadline this Friday. I'm sorry, you can't take the time off. And here's what's happening, is this is not intentional. This is not that your CEO is lying to you or whoever is talking the great game, which might be you, because I ran into this myself as a leader. What happens is you say in public, in front of everybody, wellness is important. I'm going to stand up here on the stage at the company kickoff and tell you how important wellness is, and then I do not ever talk about it again in a place that anybody can hear it. What I talk about is deadlines. I talk about our MBOs, our OKRs. Here's all the things we need to get done. Here's how many new logos we need. Here's how much revenue we have. And what managers hear is that they're accountable for delivering these measurable attributes. Wellness is not measurable. Not to them. And so what happens is if you're not paying attention as a leader, right? And for those of you who don't get the reference on the gorilla in the room, and I assume not everybody has seen The Invisible Gorilla, I'm going to give it away because it's like 20-year-old research. It's this really great video. You actually read the book about it. It's research by Christopher Chabris and Dan Simons. And they basically will say to you, they'll put up a video. They say, we're going to pass a basketball back and forth. Count how many times the people in white shirts pass the basketball. And they show you it's like an elevator lobby they're doing it in. 3 people in white shirts, 3 people in black shirts. And so you start counting the basketball being passed. They each have a basketball. There's 2 basketballs. You ignore one, you just follow the other. Great. They do this for like 30 seconds. Nothing's made it's a minute. You get done, they say, how many times did the basketball get passed? It's 22. Then they say, how many of you saw the gorilla? Because halfway through it, somebody in a gorilla suit walks out into the middle, stands in front of the people, the ball's actually getting passed behind them, thumps their chest and walks off. 50% of humans do not see the gorilla. 50% of humans will not see the gorilla that is standing in front of the task, thumping on their chest, demanding your attention, and you still don't see it. Why? Because you told your brain to focus on a task. And so you're measuring the task. And so when you focus your managers on measuring things like specific outputs, specific metrics, anything not on that gets ignored. So wellness gets ignored because the manager has no way to say this is important. Simple trick for you, how many people have like some vacation tracking system where you can see who's taken too much vacation? How many of you look at it to see who's taken too little? Great, awesome, there are way more hands than I would have gotten 5 years ago. If you are not making sure people take enough vacation, then you are explicitly telling your managers to have them take less. Right? I like to basically go through and say, here's the minimum that I expect everybody to take for a year, and if I don't see people's schedules for it, you're doing something wrong. I need to know that they've planned which holidays that they're going to be taking. If everybody wants to take Christmas week off, that's great, but we need to know well in advance if we want to manage around that, because that's our problem, not the employees. So here's four lessons that you can apply, and you'll note that each of these applies at a different level. As an individual, focus on your own wellness, because that's your asset. As a team manager, focus tactically on how do you make sure you're not overburdening someone. And at the organizational level, how do you make sure that this is actually a priority, that you're actually measuring this. Now, let's think a little bit about inclusion. I like to think about inclusion in the context of micro-exclusions. Right? And people often use the word microaggressions. I don't like that phrase, that's me personally, because either it is micro or it is aggression. It's not both of them at the same time. Right? Because a lot of times it is something micro. How many people love football? I mean, I gotta say, I'm actually really happy to be in Carolina because right now y'all have the only football team worse than the Patriots. We're epically bad. I would like y'all to start winning some games so we can get better draft picks next year. But you come in and like on a Monday morning, you talk about the football game with your buddy, whoever it is, you're like, oh man, that was an amazing game. And then you walk into your office, and the person sitting next to them feels excluded for a moment. Because you said hello, you had this greeting, maybe you waved and that was about it. You moved on. Now, if you give this to an HR professional, in fact, most HR professionals have a video about this, and they'll say, oh, look at this microaggression. You made this person feel not welcome, and what does HR tell you to do? Well, don't talk about football with this person, right? The solution to excluding some people is to exclude more people. Seems like not the right thing to do. No, the solution to excluding some people is to include more people until you include everyone, right? Because what exclusion feels like is rain, except it's a rain of needles. Like each time you get hit, and your goal here is to reduce that rain, to let someone feel that they're being included, that they see that you're making conscious and deliberate steps, right? Maybe you say things like, no standing meetings before 10 a.m. or after 2:30 in the afternoon, and that we're explicitly doing that as an organization so that parents can deal with their kids. And if you have a meeting with no parents and you want to be outside those hours, let's talk about that. But in general, like, we're just going to do that. Right? Every parent feels seen at that moment because you said it. They feel it's a little point of inclusion. And now, when you accidentally screw up and do something that isn't parent-friendly, they don't think it's malice. Because that's what happens. If all you ever do is feel excluded from your organization, it starts to feel like aggression and malice. And so our goal is to create an umbrella by showing that it's not malice, it is ignorance, it's idiocy, like, oh, I didn't think about that, I'll do better next time. But we want to reduce the energy costs they pay just to show up and exist in the space. Because if every day we have a talk about football, and I could talk about football every day, let's be very clear, excellent. And you're sitting next to it, she's like, please don't include me in that conversation. But if we have that conversation every day and you're sitting right next to that conversation, and I don't even make eye contact with you because we're talking about football and I get so excited about this stuff, like at some point you're like, does he even know I exist? Right? And if it happens to be that I'm always talking about football with men, because that happens to be an organization who cares about it, then what do the women see? That I don't see women. They don't see that I don't see non-football fans. Y'all don't really matter to me. Sorry, I didn't say it. I forget to talk to you sometimes. Right? They might see a piece of malice there. And just to be very clear, like the best football fans I know are all women. So if you're a male football fan and you only talk to men about football, you are missing great conversations. So what do we do? So the first one is, and this is an individual level, if you want to feel a little bit more included, recognize that people sometimes act in a way that feels evil to you but was not intended that way. Don't borrow evil when it's not there, right? Never attribute to malice what you could totally attribute to incompetence. And that can feel really hard sometimes. Like this, I'll be honest, this week, it's really hard for me to not attribute some things to malice. But you try not to, right? Because it gives you the opportunity to see that something could be better. Because as soon as you're malicious to me, like, I'm gonna be rude back to you, it's totally a human nature thing, like, we'll just create this cycle where neither of us feels included. Try to move past that. I'm not telling you you have to, and I'm not telling you to assume good intent. Because often what people do is say, assume everybody has good intent. Oh, no. Most people have absolutely no intent. They live in their own bubble, you don't exist to them, right? But that's not malice, that's not evil, that's ignorance, it's discourtesy, there's a lot of negative we can say there, but they didn't consciously try to do this to you. There's an opportunity to engage there. Now at the team level, as a manager, you gotta kind of take it that one step further, and instead you really have to think about, like, how do I make sure that there are more micro-inclusions? You know what my simplest thing is make a list. How many of you have a text file with the names of every person in your organization in it? If you don't, I want you to go create one, actually more than one. And what you do is every time you have a positive encounter or interaction with someone, I do this for recognition, I love doing this with my leaders, say every time I hear you mention someone's name, I move their name to the bottom of the list. And I'll start to ask, why aren't you talking about this person who's at the top of the list? Nobody has said their name, right? If I'm looking at who I greet, I walk into my office, I saw 3 people, I talk to them. I move their names to the bottom of a list, right? I keep track of the people who were invisible. Because if I don't do it deliberately and consciously, my brain is going to help me never notice them. I won't notice that I'm not talking to you. I say, okay, we're talking about football. Let me figure out what you like to talk about. Are you a dog person, a cat person? I can get along with both of them. I'm actually good on that. I don't know, I'm seeing the laughter here, neither one. Lizard person, maybe. Right, what are we gonna talk about? Maybe I just need to listen to what you're talking about with someone else. Figure out if there's a way I can have that conversation. Get you the recognition, right? If you have like this quarterly awards program inside your organization, like we recognize people at our quarterly all hands meeting for being great contributors, you should have a list for that. Because the reality is, if you are recognizing your staff, the purpose there is to give them all an inclusive moment. And if you're always recognizing the same people, you should stop doing it. Because guess what? They don't need to be recognized that much more, and you're hurting everybody else in the room. Because they're like, why haven't I been recognized? You should say, well, how do I make sure I recognize everybody? That is actually the purpose of recognition program, is to say, I see you, you're valuable. If somebody's not valuable to you, why do you employ them? There's an organization, recognize, and this is not actually the title of the chapter, my chapter title is worse than this one, but culture is the garden of the plants that you take care of, that you celebrate, and it is the weeds that you tolerate. You should recognize that if you have somebody in your organization who's really good at giving people exclusive moments, and you do not do something about that, that is your culture. You do not get to say, well, this person doesn't represent our culture. Nope. Everybody on your team represents your culture. If you tolerate bad behaviors, you are responsible for those bad behaviors. You celebrate good behaviors, you get to be responsible for those good behaviors. So this does go both ways, but this is what you need to recognize, which is hard conversations are part of your job as a leader. If you have a person who's doing the wrong thing, and look, I had somebody who made people cry. Like, that was literally their reputation. They would make people cry, and it would be weaponized by other organizations, right? Because this person's attitude was, if you use technical language to me, then I go into technical mode, and my job as a security architect is to tell you all of the ways that you are wrong. And did it in this, Yoda was his model for the world. He's like, everybody should go into the swamps of Dagobah, and that's how you learn to do things, with somebody like Yoda telling you how bad you are at whatever you do. And there are some people who worked really well with this. And there are some people who are elsewhere in the organization who would take their most junior non-technical employee and have them go deliver a message to this person. He would then abuse them, what they would certainly perceive as abuse, which was fair. They would break out into tears about 20% of the time, and then it would come to me. And rather than being a conversation about the other organization that knew it had something that wouldn't pass muster, had set up this person, my conversation is about how I am tolerating that level of abuse. And when it first came to me, I'm like, I was in the room, I saw exactly what he did. It wasn't actually that bad. And then I'm like, but he wasn't talking to a principal architect, a peer. He was talking to a junior program manager. And I was in the room. Like, I don't even get to pretend that I was tolerating it in hiding. That was in front of me. That was my culture. I didn't really want it to be. So that's what you have to pay attention to here. Let's talk about how do you inspire people. And not to just think about inspiration as aligning people's goal to do work with the work that you need done, right? You're not trying to inspire them to do something they don't want to do. You just want them to be aligned with what you're doing. As an individual, self-inspiration, serenity is the best I can give you. How many of you are currently engaged in something you don't like? Some aspect of your job you don't like, right? How many of you are ready to quit over it? Okay, so one hand goes up real fast. Most of you didn't keep your hands up. You have made a deliberate choice to put up with that shit. Serenity is accepting that you made that choice. Stop wasting your energy complaining about the crap that you have chosen to put up with. If you don't like it, leave. If you're not willing to leave, don't waste your energy on it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not telling you you have to accept that it's good. Don't waste your energy on it anymore. I have kids. They are teenagers. One's about to go to college next year, the other one the year after. I am almost done with 18 years of crap of small children. Let me tell you, my serenity is like ready to go. But I love my kids. Some days, not know what I want to do. At the team level, you want to build relationships with people, you want to inspire them, celebrate their victories. Tell them how awesome they are. If people do security projects for you that aren't in the security team, give them cake. Even better, give them cake with the CEO. If you go to the CEO and say, oh my God, we have to solve this thing and disrupt 5 teams to do it, and the CEO says yes, and 5 teams get disrupted, when it is done, bring those 5 teams in front of the CEO, feed them cake, talk about how great they are. You know what you will discover? Not only does those 5 teams want to do work with you, other people will come to you and say, how do I get cake with the CEO? Because nobody does this, right? Celebrate their victories. Make their victories your victories, and vice versa. And at the organizational level, people love to navigate for you, especially after you've already made a bad decision, right? You've probably run into this, that you had no good choices, you make a choice, and afterwards everybody criticizes you. Well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Especially in your leadership team. Help them navigate the choice. Like, I had to do this recently. I had to take a team. I did not have any additional headcount. We got new work that was going to take 7 people out of my 95-person organization to go do. Functionally, I'm doing a RIF without the negatives of like people not being employed, but managers aren't going to get work done. There was no good solution to this one. I wrote down my solution. I did not tell to anybody. I pulled my managers in and I said, great, here's our problem, let's solve it. What should the organization look like? What work are we going to drop? Sub-teams broke out, everybody came back and were like, we can't solve this. This is a hard problem. So I'm like, okay, let's work this through a couple more times. We workshopped it. We ended up pretty close to what I'd originally proposed. Did not tell anybody that. I wasn't like trying to force that. So a couple tweaks, some things I could have done better. But after we made the change, it was hard. But nobody griped about it because they had been engaged in the thought process of what we were doing. So make sure that people get to contribute before decisions are made rather than after the decisions are made. Those are thoughts on inspiration. I've got to speed up a little bit because I'm running a little slow here. So let's talk about development. Development is easy. This is giving people the skills to change the world. It's like building anything. Start from the bottom, build your way up. In an ideal world, you would hire no senior people into your organization ever. In an ideal world, you would hire people with entry-level skills at best, and you would develop them for their career. Now, that's not an ideal world, but we've almost flipped. What do we try to do? We hire only senior people who know how to solve everything. We want unicorns. So the first thing, as an individual, if you would like to get better, then you have to accept that you're going to be wrong a lot. And in fact, the way to get right faster is to start by being willing to be wrong. Imagine if I said to you, the sky is green today. How many of you want to disagree with me? Oh, come on, you can all raise your hands. It's totally okay. This was not a trap question, right? Because I was not willing to accept I could be wrong. You want to argue with me, but you want to disagree. You want to argue with me so you can be right and make me wrong. Imagine if I said, you know, it just seems to me that the sky feels more green than usual today. How many of you want to have a conversation about what I'm seeing? Right? Maybe it's the pollen in the air. Like Carolina, y'all have weird pollen down here. I used to live in South Carolina, just to be very clear, you have awful pollen down there. Notice that slight difference. I just told you, I was willing to be wrong. It seems to me, here's the thing I'm seeing. Now I can get to right. Maybe you'll talk about the pollen. Maybe you'll talk about some weird lighting effect here in Raleigh, I don't know. So if you want to be right and learn things, you've got to be willing to fail and be wrong. As a manager, if you want to give someone feedback, you have to recognize that most of the time your feedback carries with it an implicit, I would not have done it this way, this is how I would have done it. And you have different skills than the person you're talking to, and you come from a different place. And in fact, implicitly in that, your brain is thinking, what would I have had to have been thinking to have done that? Not what was this person thinking or what did they have to apply to it. You see a reflection of yourself. You're looking through a bad one-way mirror and you see a reflection of yourself. And then they hear a reflection of themselves. It's a very bad conversation. For me, I love the EEC model. For those of you who've not run into it, it's the evidence, experience, change model of feedback, in which you tell someone, here is what happened, straight evidence. We were in this meeting, you said these words. Experience, this other person came to me and complained afterwards that this is what they felt. Right? I'm not saying you were a bad person, I'm not saying you were trying to hurt them, I'm telling you, you said these words, they were hurt. Now notice I just stopped before telling what to change. I hate the change part of feedback. Because until somebody believes they need to change, telling them what to change is a prompt for an argument. Like when they say, how can I do better? Okay, great, let's have a conversation. But the first part of feedback is getting them to believe they're doing something wrong. And then they can say, what should I change? How do I want to do that? So make sure when you're giving feedback, as much as you can, it's through a clear window, not through a mirror. Now, how many people do performance development in your organization? How many of you have something for your high potential employees, like the people that you really want to keep around? You're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to send them to leadership training. We'll give them all these opportunities. And how many of you have a system, the performance improvement plan for your bottom 5% of employees? Here's what we're going to do to document everything so we can fire them safely. And how many of you have nothing for anybody in between those two groups? Right? HR certainly doesn't. If you've got something, great for you, because that means you're probably doing it yourself. And yet, those are the people who do 80% of the work in your organization. And those are the people who, if you do not invest in them, you will be putting them into the performance improvement plan at some point. Every person in your team should have a performance development plan. And it should start with this question. What job could you be in 2 transitions from now? Not 1. Because if you talk about 1, they're going to say, well, I'm ready for my promotion. I'm not interested in talking about promotion. If you're a project manager, are you going to be a program manager? Are you going to go into product management? Are you going to go into management? What are these things? Let's develop some skills for you. Okay, let's talk about planning. Planning is really simple. This is just making sure that we don't waste work. We've gotten this far. Hopefully we've got people who are producing great value for us. Let's make sure we're not wasting it and that we're seizing opportunities even if they show up at the last minute. So as an individual and smaller skills, if you find yourself on the outside of an airplane, it does not matter if you chose to jump out of the airplane or someone threw you out of the airplane. You want a parachute. 90% of what looks like great planning in most organizations is managers and leaders who built contingency plans and were ready to move quickly. And they get credit for planning because people are like, how did you foresee this event? right? I had a COVID emergency response plan that was based on a slow-moving zombie apocalypse. I kid you not, that's literally, because we said zombie apocalypse never happened. But what if the zombies were moving slow? What would you do if you got notice of this? Well, you'd send all your people home to barricade themselves in their house, and you'd tell them to stop at Costco on the way home and pick up toilet paper and food, and you'd get them out of the building as quickly as you can. It's kind of what I did in COVID. I didn't know COVID was going to happen, but I had a parachute ready to go, right? It's recognizing that there is no perfect plan. At some point, you just have to execute. So make sure you're not spending all your time trying to plan for perfection, and instead you know when you will execute. How many people are responsible for public communications during an incident? Small handful of you. But for anybody who ever gets involved in that, most important thing you can do is set a timer. You can say, at noon today, we are releasing a communication, whether it's good or bad. Because what happens in an incident is every new piece of information, you now have to start all over again. You want to get rid of that start all over moment. And finally, recognize that if all you ever do is respond to crises and you minimally fix the problems that led you there, then you are not averting future crises and you're reducing your opportunity to control the work in front of you. So you have to learn from every crisis, what could I do, not that would solve this exact crisis, but would make 20 of them less bad. Avert those future ones so that you get back control of your planning. And then from an alignment perspective, right, you want to make sure your teams aren't working at cross purposes. So the first thing is you need to have a vision of where and who you will be when you are done with the work ahead of you, so that everybody can always test against that vision. The vision for my organization when I was at Akamai was Akamai's InfoSec team exists to be a helpful, sustainable guide to a safer destiny for Akamai, its customers, and the internet at large. Everybody could always test their work against that. If you were being rude to somebody, you were not a helpful, sustainable guide, I'll tell you that one. It was very helpful to engage with people. At the team level, outrun the bear, not your friends, right? If something has changed and you have this project that 5 teams needed to work on, and you now know that project needs to stop, so you stop working on it, guess what? Those 5 teams are never going to talk to you again because you didn't tell them first. Right? Your goal is not to outrun the bear. It's to make sure all of your friends outrun the bear. And it's okay to be slower than them if you can get everybody away from the bear. But do not move faster than your allies because they will not trust you. And finally, at the organizational level, make sure that you've got your hands on the wheel, that you're paying attention to what your organization is doing so that you can have the outputs you want and the outcomes that you want to have. So these are 18 lessons. Almost all of them are in the book. A couple of them are just restated chapters. The Outrun the Bear and the Culture one are slightly restatements of the chapter titles. And again, those slides are completely available online. I'm actually going to skip through my next 2 because I am out of time. Just to put up that slide again that has on it QR codes for you to get the newsletter and to get the talk webpage. Thank you all for coming out this morning. Really appreciate your time today.
Okay, everybody. As mentioned, this is going to be a little bit of a different format, a little bit of an experiment too. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. We would like to get everybody over into the middle of the room. And again, we're going to get people working together. So try to pick some folks that maybe you haven't met before. That's really one of the goals of today, is to make new connections, have new friends that you can call when you're working through difficult problems. And basically our format for today, AI seems to be an issue that everybody's facing. Is everybody not dealing with some sort of AI-related question in your organization right now? Jim, you don't count. Yeah, I think it's something that we've all been struggling with to some degree or another. So when John, Shelley, and I were talking about this session, we were trying to come up with a format that we thought would allow people to engage with each other and have those conversations around what are those challenges that we're facing, and then share the results. And we had 50 minutes to do this in. It's like, okay, how can we do this? So again, we've got these small group tables. What we'd like for you to do is at each table, pick somebody who's going to be your table representative, your table lead. That person doesn't have to, drive the conversation, by the way, but just you're going to see in just a minute here, we have a tool that we're going to be using that you'll be able to submit the results of your discussions through. It's a tool called Mentimeter, and we'll have a URL up on the screen that you can use to do that. So we're going to give you some time. Again, let me just advance these slides here and kind of show you a little bit. So again, the purpose of today, that networking, increasing your knowledge, exchanging ideas, small groups. We're going to have 2 questions that we're going to go through and then summarize the results from the discussion. So this is the format, and we're already running a little bit behind on the schedule. But again, we'll jump into question 1 here in a minute. We're going to give you about 10 minutes for each of these questions. So we want you to have those discussions around the table about those questions. And then, again, on the next slide, you'll get a URL that you can use to submit your thoughts from that. So, yeah, and then we will summarize. And actually, this tool is pretty interesting. We'll see how this works, but you will use AI to summarize the results from all of your discussions. So looking forward to seeing how well it does that. And then we will wrap up at the end to see what all we've learned. So actually, just to test this tool out, let me flip my screen here to a different window with the Mentimeter up and running and put that into presentation mode. So before you get going, we're going to take just a really quick one. And by the way, can anybody actually see that? That's actually a great point. Yeah, so up top of the screen, you'll see it's menti.com. Go there and then enter that code 72765013. So pick one person at your table, just one person at the table to do that. You can't, yeah, so I'm going to have to, I'll have to read it off to you. So, yeah, pick, everybody has somebody at your table? Okay. Does anybody need me to read any of the information up at the top? Menti.com or the number? Okay. The code 72765013. And that should be good for all of the survey questions that we're going to have here. So I don't think you're going to have to enter that more than once. So yeah, at your table, somebody's already voted, but get your table consensus. Are you optimistic, pessimistic, or you just don't know yet about AI? So I'm going to give you like a minute to do that. Now we got somebody changed from, or maybe it was just another vote coming in. Yeah, I think it was another vote coming in. Okay. So now you get a feel for how the tool works. Next couple of questions are going to be more open-ended questions. So instead of voting, you're going to be typing a response. But yeah, so let's jump in and again, give you about 10 minutes for this first question. So let's talk about risks and what can you do with them. I think everybody probably has contemplated what those risks are. So what are some things that you are doing in your organizations or that you might want to do in your organization to address the risk? Because whether we like it or not, AI is coming. We're going to have to deal with it in our organization. So what can we do about it? So jump in, have those discussions, and again, use the, it should be the same code, 7265013. When you advance it here, it should now be getting an option to enter some free-form text. So you can, I think you can enter several things. Let me know if you can't. But yeah, just get your ideas out there. We'll give you about, let's see, until about 11:35 to do that. And we'll be walking around, checking in, seeing if you need any help. Just flag us down if you do.
And it's tough. It's right now we can't, right? Unless we bring like an outside tool that helps us with something like that. So it's all about education. So we got to educate our employees to use it responsibly, appropriately, to fact check the responses they get back, to not divulge any like IP or any secrets or anything really killing or unrelated. So it's tough because we're relying on employees, and of course not all employees are going to do the right thing, either accidentally they might divulge something they shouldn't. But that's why we're trying to bring it in-house, because we wanted more control over it and keep it within our environment compared to going out to like a third-party website like ChatGPT. So we're trying to migrate away from ChatGPT and bring it more into our little Scrappy chat. So it's a slow process, and hopefully eventually it will, but they still have active data.
Right? But at the end of it, it is very much possible that you are giving a way out to exfiltrate your data. Because it's all data at the end of it. Because that's where people have put their head.
Yeah, that's what I would hope. Tolerance and comfort level. It doesn't involve company data, just posture. Yes. It is company data, let's,
So I guess who is excited for AI then? If we are having so many issues with it.
I mean, I use ChatGPT.
need it every day.
Yeah, so I'm fine with it.
Not for the company, for personal.
No.
I use it every day.
No, so I have.
I don't work Truist.
So personally, I own a law firm.
Or a site now.
Oh,
So
We're a startup, so we
creating
use it to code.
forms for clients and stuff like that. No, I wish.
and the medical exams, yes. Yeah, we are old fashioned. We don't use AI.
I'm only talking I think we use AI in our products. But the first question to all the vendors there is like, okay, how's the model work? How long does it take to train it? And what's the value am I going to get out of this? What's the ROI?
From a security perspective, we're looking at people who can do really good collective models of threat data over a long period of time to give us a predictive outcome on this. It always changes because it depends on what's your score rank. CSS, I think we do this. But our exploitability, we're looking at a 20-year cycle stuff that was a problem 20 years ago. It's now snuck back into the system again. What are those controls? Can we use AI?
It's funny, as you read the question, you can read it as, what are you doing to avoid the risks that come with AI? But you can also read it, what do you do at the risk of not doing anything with AI, right? Because we know it's coming, right? It will happen. And so how do you enable people to use it in a way that's compliant with what you're trying to accomplish, the problems you're trying to solve, in a way that doesn't expose company data, right, to a general model that can then be, right, a real problem.
Well, there's a first throw it into there without your secrets, and it'll tell you what to do, right? It'll walk you through an easy path without your developers pulling their out, or doing different things like that. Throwing at actual security problems. Yeah, and I think we all read a million things a day, a week, but it'll pull the novel things weekly for you, that are in your specific area too, to just kind of maybe alert you to things.
It may be a noise. Other than that, it creates no harm. All the detection. So enterprise-wide, wherever detection is needed, put it on. No issues. It may be extra on this burden. We can bear with it. Other than that, it may create false positive. You are bringing in human to validate it. How much is the true positive, false positive? Once you train the model properly, leverage that for detection. All the detection. No, the question was like, are we afraid to scale it massively? To scale massively, put it in a detection. That's one of the best use cases. It's create no harm.
How to get access to it. I think that really helps. And you definitely saw like the interest of a lot of people wanting to use it. And sort of once they would have that access, it sort of faded away a little bit. So you had that niche group who stuck with it, wanted either to develop against it or either for our products or use it.
Companies are asking.
But the first one, the lack of governance and data classification in the company, because even if you do the private AI, you still need people in the company to have certain access to it, depending on what their role is. So role management, access management, and data classification for a lack of governance. Then we talked about how the attackers are using it as well. The phishing campaigns have become much better and more powerful. They get company insights so that they do social engineering better. They have the power of deep fakes and visuals that can lead your users in the company. So awareness training is extremely important. We were talking about, we have a person on our table who uses it to write malware, right? To automate penetration testing. So the bad guys are using it as well. So we, as the good guys, need to use services like this one to automate pen testing to find it before the bad guys. So that's about it. I don't know if I missed something. The magic.
Shut the robot down. Oh, that was it.
The magic kill switch.
Got it. What other table? Who wants to summarize? I heard you volunteer. Who was? Did you guys capture some other things outside of what we talked about already?
All right, so I'm like the least qualified person to talk here, but basically we've covered about 3 of those. We talked specifically about governance, you know, the whole GRC part of it, the elevated security risk, and we didn't really get in a whole lot about training, but we did talk a lot about, yeah. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, we did. So we talked about training, so anyway, so.
Chuck, John, either one of you want to address what you think are the concerns that?
I'm just glad that upskilling and training was on there, because it's hard to do anything if people aren't educated about it. So really happy to see that on there.
I think for me, a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around it right now, and misunderstandings around how it works. And so you're basically got a lot of people trying to stand it up and work with it with misconceptions. There's a massive upskilling need. There's resourcing need. And then for me, at least in healthcare, thinking through what the ethical guardrails are as we roll it out that are going to give us the governance structure to understand like how to do it well.
Yeah, and I'm going to be very brief because we need to move on to the next question. But yeah, I think these are all really spot on. I think as security leaders, we're always in that position of having to figure out the balance between business value and risk. And getting that right is very tricky, but clearly there's a tremendous amount of business value to come out of this technology. I mean, again, this very tool, I was actually just amazed. This is Mentimeter's been around for a little while, but this AI feature's new. It was like a little beta thing I had to click to turn on. But to be able to get that really quick summary of these conversations, and Shelley, you were sharing with me yesterday about I guess a WebEx or Zoom call that you all done that similarly had summarized the response, that whole conversation into some very actionable points. So yeah, it's a very powerful technology. With great power comes great responsibility, but we're security professionals. We can work through that. We can find through these tools that we already have ways to address those issues. So yeah.
One thing also that I think that people should be talking about are what are the new attack vectors, right? We're so used to our existing attack vectors and we know what they are, but are we really thinking through and figuring out what the new attack vectors are that will be upstream and outside of our organizations where the data live that will populate the AI that will then give us answers. So that's another thing from a security perspective we ought to be thinking about is how do we now contain things that are outside of our organizations?
Yeah, and I think it was alluded to over here. I mean, basically the improvements in the ability of a fisher to write a very convincing message. I mean, this is pretty compelling. You used to be able to say, hey, you just look for bad grammar and spelling, but that's not really the case anymore. We actually saw one a couple of weeks ago, purportedly from our CEO, that was a layoff notice, and it looked. I mean, it was written spot on. It could have been any corporate layoff notice. So yeah, that's definitely a bigger threat there. So yeah, real quick. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think even if a human had sat down and done that summarization, that same problem applies. By the way, you always have to check. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next question. So I think that was the yep. Let's stop scrolling. Let's go to the next question. Whoops, sorry. That button is the one I was meant to hit. So let's talk about opportunities now. So let's spend about 10 minutes. We'll go until we'll go into 11:52 and talk about the opportunities that you see for AI in your organization from a security team perspective. How can this make us more effective as security professionals? How can it make our teams with limited resources more effective at our jobs? Again, recognizing that the attackers out there are also using these tools to attack us. So yeah, what are some things that you can do? So same thing here, use Mentimeter to put your ideas up there, and we'll see what it comes back with once you're done. So yeah, about 11:52, have at it. I think we're about up on time here, so let's press the magic button and see what, oh, there's one popping in. Anybody got any last minute ones? Okay. We're going to press the magic space bar and let it AI for us. Okay, so we got several things here. So threat analysis, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. Being able to improve automation, faster detection, doing risk assessments. I actually think that's a great use case. Writing scripts, data analysis, training. I actually think that's a good idea as well. Being able to tailor training for individuals. Efficiency and visibility. So yeah, I think those seem to be, when I was reading through them, again, putting aside my own biases and how I was looking at everything, it seems to line up with what I was expecting to see. But yeah, anything that folks would like to jump in and kind of highlight from your conversations. Who wants to go first?
Who wants to summarize? Come on now, other tables. I want to hear from somebody other than these two tables, too.
Okay. I think that the first point was it would be efficiency. We would be able to efficiently do some of the menial work that we have to do, the tedious jobs, and that would leave us more time to, one, dedicate to real risk management and working with governance to find mitigation strategies, but also it would allow us to work more with the people that we're trying to train and help them protect themselves in the organization and really start doing our job.
Yes. Yep. I want to see a hand for the next table.
So we went through different areas of cybersecurity. So we did talk about training and education through phishing campaigns as well. As the bad guys are using it for phishing campaigns, we're using it for phishing campaigns. We talked about reverse engineering of malware, where it can help us. And as well, it can help us write code faster. It's not better. We said we're not going to replace people because the people need to be the expert to review the code, but it's going to speed up the writing of the code and automation processes. We talked about pen testing, right? Attack simulation, where it's going to help us write the use cases based on the company data, so it's personalized to the company, what kind of use cases we have to test for. Anomaly detection, right? So UEBA tools, user and entity behavior analytics, they use machine learning already, so a lot of companies already have them in place. You train on the user data, what's the usual behavior of the user, and you look for abnormal behavior. And these are the cases that you're going to choose. When it comes to vulnerability assessment, and actually all other alerts as well, prioritization, how is AI going to help us to prioritize what we're going to address first? And it's a good additional source of information that can be used for remediating as well, because it's trained on the company data. What else do we have? And security assessments, which was already mentioned. And again, scaling up the labor and the efficiency, but not replacing fully the labor.
Other tables? I'm going to say for me, I'll jump in real quickly. In healthcare, I have certain domains that I'm really excited for us to jump in here. One is insider threat. It's really hard to do insider threat well, and you can't do it without massive amounts of data and information at your hands, and humans can't scale for that, so machines can, which is really, really exciting. Vulnerability management, my God, it's hard. It's really hard in a large organization to do vulnerability management, and the machines can probably do it a lot easier. Embedded in that is identity management, like trying to find the mover events and auto-processing through some of the mover events in your organization. GRC, please tell me that we're all going to let the machine write our policies and not have humans write these anymore. Like, just let the machine write them and then edit them. And then there's a ton of non-security elements that I'm really excited about seeing take off as well, that will scale our organizations for our clinicians and our operational people and others. But the number of things that are out there on the horizon are just waiting to be seen that this will do. And I actually am a pessimist usually at heart, but this is one of the few areas where I've gotten excited and dug in and started to learn a lot more and started to think about like what we can do with this.
And just one thing I wanted to add to that, there was discussion of helping out with manual labor. One of the interesting applications on a commercial side is looking into new contracts that are coming through, right? Whenever you're contracting with a customer, have they said, oh, we want incident notification within 22 minutes, right? Or full resolution of an incident within 4 hours. And you're like, well, what happens if that's a Saturday or a Sunday? So definitely getting ahead of that and letting AI take a look at the RFPs that we're getting in as we're talking with customers and hopefully signing them to identify areas of significant risk with more context than just a traditional pattern match. On the flip side, it's going back and looking at the thousands of contracts that you have that may have never gone through security governance, might have been overridden by the bid desk or the sales team, and suddenly you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you've been bound to, oh, by the way, you have to apply a particular standard in Italy to this particular contract, and they expect reports every week. So I think it's interesting to, there's an aspect of the labor there, but there's an aspect of risk management too, and then figuring out how do you deal with that as a team? Is there additional work that needs to go in on the contracting side?
Yeah, and one of the things that we wanted to do with this session was generate ideas and form connections. So now I'm going to go back to our procurement people and make sure one of them has access to our AI tool so that we can start to do exactly what Mike just said. So that's brilliant.
So I like what this table is talking about increasing the efficiency. Looks like if you have a lot of data, you can have these programs really help you understand the information, but you have to be a little bit careful how much you rely on that because it could decrease creativity. So I thought that was a great point. That's something I'm always worried about too. If you trust it to do everything, write everything for us, then maybe we'll start becoming a little bit less creative. But if you know exactly what you want it to spit out and you have a lot of data, it's amazing for that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, we're going to do one more, and this is going to be a lightning round because we only have 5 minutes. But I like this one because we talked about it a couple of times, what we can do to upskill our teams to address these threats, capitalize on these opportunities. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes. 2 minutes for your best ideas, and then we'll close out with the responses for that.
Write me a paper that's an argument where you're citing for this particular side, or this particular thing, or this particular criteria. You can chain your questions. So you can do that with anything. So if you're writing a policy, you wrote a policy, hey, and then I look at this policy. Does this sound for a company that's in this sector, right? It's going to give you a yes or no answer, and it's going to say, well, maybe you should add this. It's going to give you something that you didn't think about. right? It's a good tool to have.
How do I decipher it?
It's a great question, right? So think about, so you've deployed AI within your company for network orchestration. Like, I'm a hacker, I compromise your company, and I say, hey, AI, tell me where the HSM is at.
Can we actually take AI people and train them on cybersecurity? Hey, you know, that's an option as well, versus just teaching cybersecurity people AI. So yeah, definitely some opportunity to bring more people into the field. So yeah, here are the groupings: training, mentorship, sandboxes, and use cases. So and one more down there. Ungrouped responses. So I guess it had a couple that it didn't feel like it could put in the right place. So yeah, in the interest of time, don't want to stand between everybody and lunch, which is starting in 1 minute. Just appreciate everybody being in here this morning. Hopefully we accomplished the goal of letting everybody get to know some other folks in local security leaders here. This is a very, we have such an amazing security community here in the Raleigh area. And you know, we kind of think we know everybody, but we really don't. You know, we have our circles, and really one of the goals today is to expand those circles out. So hopefully you were able to do that, and you now have some new contacts that you can keep in mind as you're struggling through some of these AI challenges down the road.